This is your cell.
Si eres ladrillo, seré concreto. Si eres oreja, seré Van Gogh. Si eres...
فما كاري ابيض، فما ريكتانجل ابيض فيرتيكال.
تو دي تصور دي. كيك.
أي بنات.
Oder bleibt es Utopie? Jeder Mensch weiß, es ist ein Kreis, nimmer verweilt, Elend und Leid, der Liege treibt, innerlich schreit, sich zerreißt.
Hey, welcome to Berlin Critics Week. Great to have you with us. You're about to witness and enjoy the, well, you don't have to, but you're free to enjoy the debate titled Lost and Found. We have created, of course, a wonderful program of films which we are showing you these days, and this is one of them. We've been live every day at 8 p.m. Berlin time during the week to discuss the program, and there's 2 more debates to come. This one will start right after. There's one more tomorrow in relation to our program Talking Style, where we will discuss the films Freizeit, or The Opposite of Doing Nothing by Caroline Pitzen, and A Museum Sleeps by Camille Deschenay. And yeah, tonight this will all be about the films An Unusual Summer and Horsetail. We couldn't be more happy to show these films to you, and especially in this combination. And I couldn't be more happy to introduce Devika, who is a member of our selection committee and the moderator of this debate. So have a good time out there. I will vanish into a Critics Week symbol now and return like a miracle in the end.
Thank you, Dennis. We will lose and find you at the end. And hi, everyone. I'm Devika Girish. As Dennis said, I'm on the selection committee of Berlin Critics Week, and I'm also a critic editor in New York. And I'm really thrilled to be moderating this particular debate. I think, as Dennis hinted earlier, this was one of our most inspired pairings. If you've seen the films, which I hope everyone who's watching has, you know what I mean. You know, they're just very incredible films, like full of ideas. And I'm thrilled to be joined by the directors of both films. So we have Kamal Aljafari, who is the director of An Unusual Summer. Hi, Kamal. I think you're muted, Kamal, unless only I can't hear you.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting unmuted. Thank you so much. It's really a great pleasure to have the film screened and have the discussion with you all, and to have the film also with the film Horsetail.
And Kamal, where are you from? I just think it's fun to sort of get this virtual format makes it so that it's so international, and I'm curious where you're joining us from.
Well, I am in Palermo in Sicily.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And then we have Shyam, Sunder, and Manoj, Leonel, who are the directors of Horsetail. Hi, both of you.
Hi.
And where are you guys joining us from?
So I'm joining from Mumbai, which is in India. And
yeah, I'm from Chennai. So we are like quite a distance apart right now. Yeah.
Got it. And then, our fourth panelist is Amy Taubin. I don't think Amy needs any introduction. She's a legendary critic. She is someone I've had the privilege of working with and learning from before. And I know she's joining us from her loft in New York. Amy, thanks so much for making time for this. We're just incredibly thrilled and excited to pick your brain, about these films.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and it has been my pleasure to look at both of these films, which are really interesting, and as you said, an interesting pairing.
I'm glad you think so. And as you all know, the title for today's debate is Lost and Found. And I'll say a little more about why we, in the selection committee wanted to put these films together and what, that title meant to us. But before that, I actually want to ask each of you, if you watched the films back to back, or, in the case of the directors, when you watched the other film, how did they connect in your mind? What was your experience? So maybe we'll start with Kamal.
I was actually quite mesmerized and surprised by the film. It's very surprising to have a scene where you wake up with a tail, right? I mean, and then the film takes you into so many different layers of life, and totally unlinear, the kind of films that I enjoy and like, that actually are similar to life itself. So it is a kind of film for me that you can find anything, many things. And we all know this experience where we wake up and we have something that we haven't had before going to bed. So in that sense, it was really a very special experience for me, and I very much appreciated and liked the camera angle, the perspective. I didn't understand who's filming. And this was in fact a quality, because most of the time when people direct, you feel like it's being directed in a way that becomes less mysterious. And in this case, it was really the camera angle made everything so mysterious and full of secrets. Yeah.
And Shyam and Manoj, I mean, what was your experience watching An Unusual Summer, and how did you think it spoke to your film? I'm kind of curious if you made any connections.
So when I watched the film, I think it was early in the morning. I'd just woken up and I decided, okay, I'm just going to watch this film now. And I just loaded it. And it just, it was a very interesting morning because it was almost like I was transported to a very, very different neighborhood from where I was. And that quality of, being on just watching and continuously watching and slowly being invested in characters that are barely more than pixel sized, right, on a laptop also. So it's like it's not in a theater like what would have happened or what will happen with the festival. So for me it was like so digital and so interesting in its application of I just really like that aspect of the visual storytelling. And yeah, for me the main question was what happened to the guy, because I'm constantly looking at the date as well. So you're like 2006 and today's 2020, and there's such a big gap of time. And yeah, so I think before we were just thinking about that.
For me, Kamal's film, like it. I'll use the same words not because he used it, because I was like going through the same emotions when I watched the film. Like it was mesmeric. After a certain point, I'm so taken by the fact that the camera was there in that particular spatial location that his father put it, which makes me kind of like really dislocated, like the fact that Kamal didn't completely make this film, this father partly made this film, is like, also the fact that the shot is so poetic, that single shot that I'm seeing throughout is just so poetic. And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but Kamal was also talking about the camera and the angles and stuff like that. But that's one of the places that we love putting our camera, that place where his father put it. So there's too many parallels actually that I can see, but I don't want to dwell on it because it will get boring. And the two films also are so parallel. A lot of things are. Kamal was also talking about the temporality of things in both these films. So there was a mesmeric quality. It was completely poetic, and I'm a big fan of Unusual Summer. I'm just like totally taken by it. I just watched it yesterday morning, and I was like totally taken by it.
I'm fascinated by these like morning viewings of watching the film with breakfast. That's an interesting experience. Amy, how about you? You obviously came to both these films, together. From what you told me, you sort of watched them one evening. I think you must tell people that you watched the two films instead of the Golden Globes. That was your
Yes, I did. I thought I'll get on with this tonight, and it'll be a good excuse not to even go near the TV to watch the Golden Globes. And everyone who I wrote that to said I had made the better choice. The Golden Globes are scum. I mean, they've always been scum. On the surface, these films are nothing alike at all. Court's Tale is incredibly vivid. There's a ton going on in the image. The image itself is excessively expressive and means to be. And Kamal's film, at least the picture part of it, not the language part of it, but the picture part of it, it's barely there, and it certainly is not what we would consider an expressive image. It's the minimal image possible, and it's the kind of image that you say to yourself, because I think everyone has these images. Can I inflict this on anyone except myself? Can I actually ask them to watch this? And what would it mean to ask the public to watch something that I can see my father here? I'm presuming that's your niece who's talking on the soundtrack. She can see her grandfather there, but no one else. It's surveillance footage, and it is totally amazing how much you care about it simply because it's the only thing that remains. And I think everyone has some kind of drawer in their house. I have a file cabinet from my father's factory because I have, as you can see, this is a tiny part of my very big living space. And so I took his file cabinets after he died, which was 30 years ago. And I brought them home. I haven't opened them since. I've always thought, well, maybe one day I'll make a work out of that. And now I think I won't make a work out of that. And so when I die, people are going to throw them out in the street. And so if you don't make a work of it, then even that is gone. And that's what moved me so much, that somehow this had to be brought into a context where it becomes part of a history, a family history, a film history, a history of a life that's no longer there, both in the personal sense and in the larger community sense. Yeah, but Horsetail is a film that's constantly reaching for more. What does it mean? And this guy is so manic, and he needs to find out what this thing is. I mean, it's odd connection, but it reminded me very much, partly because it's about dreaming and partly because you are two filmmakers working together. And that's my big question. How on earth did you together, like Buñuel and Dali, decide what this film would be? That's, you know, what would be the events and the events of his dream, because that's what I thought when I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Amy, you kind of hit the nail on the head, like why we wanted to put this together, because we thought that both the films, I mean, this is one of their many qualities, but you know, Kamal's film is minimalist and Horsetail is maximalist in a certain sense, whether, you know, in a visual sense. And both those extremes sort of achieve similar ends of, you know, obfuscating either through too much or too little. And, you know, both of them sort of set up these quests that become sort of unresolvable, or their resolution becomes irrelevant, either because you're giving us too little or too much. And both that too much and too little are, you know, two sides of the same coin, because in a sense, because of the staticness of Kamal's image, the visual minimalism, there's also the too muchness of duration, the too muchness of attention. And with Horsetail, it's, you know, there's so much going on that it all, you know, everything is changing constantly. And so there's this sense of, you know, speed, and there's a sense of ephemerality that's very strong. So that's why we kind of wanted to put them together and think about what do both films, using their various strategies, hide and show. You know, what are the strategies of concealment and revealment? So, but before we go, you know, deeper into that, I kind of just want to ask the filmmakers, what are your films about, in your words? I mean, we have a log line, right? Horsetail is about a guy who wakes up with a horse's tail. An Unusual Summer is about a filmmaker whose father installed, you know, a camera to catch the vandal who had vandalized his car. So that's like the starting point. But what would you say these films are about? Can you say something in that vein?
You start.
Manoj, are both of us going to? What is the film about? I think that's. I mean, the film is about a lot of things. So I think it was about trying to express something that was extreme in all its points, and hence has that maximalist approach that you're talking about. So it was about stretching that limit on every either if it were narrative, or if it were visual, or if it were sound, or whatever it was about maximizing that. And for us, in terms of production, that came from a script point of view. The script that came to us, which was written by G. Rajesh, was in itself very dense and in itself very complete. So our entire journey was about trying to first understand that text, and to sort of play within that text and maximize every point to create that film. So what was the film about? It's about the process, really, for me. So it was about creating something new that uh, in no way is similar to anything, or in every way similar to everything. So yeah.
I mean, in my case, you know, I cannot claim that I have made this film entirely, because this was really this was really shot by my father. This was his idea. So I inherited, so to say, this material, And as someone who very much appreciate and love minimalism, aesthetically speaking, I was very surprised, first of all, about the framing itself, because the frame was really very accurate. It did exactly what it was needed to do, is to show the exact corner of the street that would allow my father to know who is the person throwing the stone and where he goes after throwing the stone. So this camera position was really masterful. And I learned a lot from it, because it's really all about what do you want to say, right? What do you want to express? Or what do you want to receive in this case? In the case of the surveillance camera. So I was left with this material, and I started watching it, and I was very surprised. It all started like a joke, because my sister was joking with me that it takes me so long to make a film, and she was saying, you should look in this box, there's a lot of VHS, maybe you can make a film with them. And I was like, which VHS, which, yeah, look in this box. So I actually packed them all. I took them back with me to Berlin, and she couldn't believe it. I'm taking all this kind of dusty and, old tapes with me. And I was really fascinating for the fact that Amy was mentioning. This was the life of my family in an entire month. I wasn't there. So I could really participate in the daily life entirely. I could just put the tape and watch this again and again. And I have like a whole universe in front of me. My family, the entire neighborhood, all the characters that I knew from my childhood, they appear suddenly. And I very much like this coincidence of the camera recording almost everyone. And people that I even have forgotten about, suddenly they appear and they bring with them back all the memories they had. And so I was watching, and I started taking notes, and this became almost a diary, and entirely personal, right? I mean, none of you know these people or know this corner or have relation to this corner. But then, I started really exploring different aspects of this poetry that is in front of me, happening in front of me, and the mechanical character of life itself. And this is universal, and this is where in fact this material becomes a tool of expression and something to be shared with others, and it's not personal anymore, it's universal.
It's interesting. You are both describing, having found the films in some way. Like Shyam, you said that you guys got the script, and Kamal, you found these VHS tapes. So sort of these films, as directors, these films came, found you, or you found them, I guess, in part. So that's another just fascinating parallel. But Amy, I want to ask you, as a critic, is it important for you to know what a film is about when you finished watching? Is that a question that you ask yourself while writing?
I don't think I've ever asked myself that. I mean, I'm trying to think, but no, that is not a question I ask. That's a question that I'm probably trying to figure out as I'm writing what would be, I guess I would say, what is important or necessary in this film. Because, basically, I try to be careful and not really write about filmmakers' intentions, although I'm always interested in that. And a lot of times that spills out. But I try to see the object that's there. And these days, I never write anymore about anything that I don't like. You know, I have that luxury that I can say, I'm really interested in this. And then I'm trying to figure out why I'm interested, what it is in the work that makes me want to write about it. But that's not answered by what is the film is about, you know. So I don't know if that's helpful.
No, that makes sense. You know, I'm just curious if, as a viewer or a critic, you're looking to find something in particular. You know, there's just the process of viewing, and criticism is also a process of losing yourself and then finding something. And I'm sort of curious what it is that. Is there anything that you're looking to find? Is there a moment that you know you found something?
No.
You know, in the process of writing?
No, it's kind of, yes, in the process of writing sometimes, and that's when you think, oh yeah, it's okay to write. You discover something about the work, not about yourself, but something about, for me, it's basically somehow how the form makes meaning. And when I find that, I'm really happy. A film has in some way moved me or seduced me, or I want to see it many times, and then I want to tell people about it. That's all.
I mean, it's a kind of similar to what Amy was is saying, you know, the way I work with this film, because I felt the necessity at some point that I have to share this with people. Because what you see in front of you is, in fact, any person, any passerby in any corner of the world. And I think this is what exactly more and more missing in many movies made today, because there is a kind of limitation and an attempt to define things by asking the question, what is your film about? Where is this from? Etc., etc. And a work of art and a film should be really shared, because there is an experience that corresponds to every one of us, to the human nature. And I think this is the core base of any work of art, is to be able to express something that resonates with people, no matter where they come from, what language they speak, and especially in the case of cinema, because in writing, okay, you would say I'm writing English, so people not reading English won't be able to understand. So books are translated, but in cinema, you don't need translation. And especially if you work with images. And this is the pleasure of having in our hands such a medium that can reach anyone, can reach any heart in the world.
I think there are some more nuances to that, though, the idea that a film or images are universal, right? Because films are still webs of references, you know, they come from a sense of place. In fact, both of your films have a very particular sense of place and cultural context. And, you know, what Kamal, you were saying reminded me of a quote that's very dear to me. You know, the Senegalese filmmaker Ousmane Sembène, he was once asked by an interviewer, are your films understood in Europe? And, you know, and he replied and said, Europe is not my center. Europe is the outskirts, you know. And he was such a big proponent of this idea that African filmmakers should not be worried about making films for a European audience, should not be worried about whether their films are understood, right? And that is I think that filmmakers from certain parts of the world do face that unfair burden of, you know, whether their films, the cultural context is translatable, you know, whether it's universal enough. And, you know, it's not always I think as a parent that it's universal. And so I'm curious if, in either of your cases, that's something you wrestled with, maybe Shyam and Manoj, you're Indian filmmakers, you're Tamil filmmakers, maybe not everyone in the audience knows that, you're working within the Tamil industry, which is separate from Bollywood. And, there's layers that you're working within. And is that something you think about, how transparent the film is? Is the film going to be understood? Is it going to be received? Is it going to be able to circulate in the same way that a Hindi film or, a Western film might be?
No, for us, Devika, there is, I don't know, proximity issues. No, like so we don't think about it that often. There are those invisible hegemonies and othering that's happening from where you are looking at, but we can't take that into factoring when we are working every day. We try to try to find points of unity, throughout the world. Like Kamal was saying, those points of unity are worth fighting for. But then again, we respect where we like if in Gudrewal, I'll perfectly understand if you don't get half the references. The rest of, I'm sure you're going to get. It's almost mechanical from the script point of view, and how we've managed to reach you. Like so in that sense, yeah, there is some semblance of a middle ground that we have to kind of get in tune with, because otherwise then Kamal's film, I can get it because it's completely like, it also means something to him personally because of his father. And I'm talking about the difference between the two films, so nothing unregarding in any sense. So in that sense, it's just that for us, we cannot locate it in particularly certain way, but a lot of the concepts that we are grappling with, like civilizational memory and a kind of despair that both the landscapes are coming from, we are searching for something, and these things are parallel to each other, but definitely not in an everyday sense. We don't think about the kind of uh, differences that are existing. Like if I were to grapple with the differences within even India, I would probably not be intelligent enough to get around it. So for me to even trying to escalate it and say, let me find points of actually finding points of unity throughout the world is much more easier rather than within India.
Yeah,
But
I
at
think
the same, I was just going to add that I think with this film, a lot of the cultural references that are alien to us in that sense. I mean, for a Tamil speaking audience is our primary audience, right? So our primary audience, they may not have heard of some of the concepts that we're dealing with, say, or just the names that are being thrown, the pop references that are being thrown. So, and at the same time, someone sitting in New York probably would not know the nuances of, say, MGR and what MGR would be. So I'm just drawing two columns here, but it's like within
You want to
each
quickly
column there are.
just say who MGR is, just so.
Okay, MGR is one of the biggest actors that who to ever act on Tamil screens. He was also the chief minister for several years, and actually got elected when he was on a hospital bed. So that is the level of legend that MGR's. I mean, that is the level of legacy that has been created. So it's almost in some sense mythical, because for someone like me who was born after his death, that point is. I mean, he is before my time in that sense. So he is a myth.
So this film and this Zoom call is a complete reduction of this whole myth that we are feeling right now here, because this person has been dead for 30 years and he was both the chief minister and the lead actor who, like, there's no visible difference that naive audience. I'm not calling the audience naive. I'm just calling the whole public persona of, their understanding of cinema was very minimal in terms of the difference between what was there on screen and outside of the screen. The reduction was not conceived by any of them. I don't think it's still conceived, because still even now in our place, all the big superstars are all like, it's the natural for them to come into politics. And it's not just MGR. It was not MGR who was the beacon of the story. See, because of the whole othering thing, I have to explain too much and might get in a little bit boring in the Zoom call.
Propaganda.
So when cinema arrived and it became all propaganda vehicle with the Third Reich and all that, it here in a completely different sense, subaltern mediums called the Dravidian movement, they started utilizing cinema as a core medium to propagate, and now they are quite in a powerful state. And nothing against them, it's just that cinema is so that the reduction is not at all visible. For us, cinema is actually very real. So the jokes that come in the film are not just funny, they're like really real, about MGR being dead and they just saw him on screen dancing and playing. So a lot of it comes down to how powerful this medium is, how powerful the reduction can be to people who don't conceive it. So for me, MGR is like a super duper icon who was both this and that, but I don't want to comment on anything further than that.
But I guess, I mean, are you looking for an ideal viewer? Is your ideal viewer someone who knows who MGR is, who knows Borges and Freud and Lacan? I mean,
no. Sorry, Devika, to interrupt you. No ideal viewer.
No.
It's just that. So when we are projecting a film, we are being honest. So we are not putting things that people don't know. Just because people don't know, you don't not put them. Just because people know, you put them. See, there are many reasons why you put them. Collective psyche, symbolism of Lacan. See, a lot of things. The collective psyche itself is too fragmented to understand anything. Like clearly write anything for screen. So when they are here, we are just trying to play for an imaginary audience that are inside all of us. So to play to them and then find points of unity. That's all.
I think this whole answer has been like a really great demonstration of what it means to even start thinking about those cultural layers. Kamal, I'm wondering if you have anything to add. Your film is also from very specific Palestinian context. There's this whole subtextual narrative of the occupation and Ramla's transformation. Are you thinking about whether people are picking up on that, or
Actually, I just wanted to add, just to clarify, when I talk about universality, I don't mean by it making the film for others or for the world, because there's no such a thing. When I start working on the film, my main motivation was really personal, totally personal. I was making this material for myself. And slowly, when I started assembling the images, working with the images and then recording sound, because these images were without sound, I had to record sound. Basically, I did what my father did with the camera. I went there and I recorded the sound. So it was really, in fact, a challenge and a pleasure at the same time, having found the material. And then I was put in a situation where I had to choose between takes, right? I mean, this is what you do when you shoot a fiction film or documentary film. And then it's easy to say this is a good take, this is a bad take, because the actor didn't walk, you know, she didn't, or he didn't speak the way you wanted them to speak, or they didn't walk the right, they didn't do the right thing. But this was like perfect. It was really people were walking the way they were supposed to walk. And I could spend, as I was saying before, I could spend hours. I mean, I really, maybe I'm sounding extreme, but there was one tape on a Wednesday, and it was 3 hours. And then at some point, after I was almost done with this film, I was thinking I should make another one just with only this one tape. Because this one tape was full of things happening in front of the camera. And I could really go back again and again and watch it. It was really fascinating. And why Wednesday? Because on a Wednesday, there is a market in the town. And there is a kind of, I remember it always from my childhood, there's a kind of festive, you know, feeling that Wednesday is the market and everybody goes to the market, everybody meets in the market. There are cafes and restaurants in the markets, and people are passing by with, you know, with their bags coming back to the market. And you could really construct again a new film only with that. So it is really, it was really challenging because this material was like life itself. It was endless because the camera was positioned there and nobody was stopping and, you know, stopping recording and recording again and rearranging the scene. No, everything was really left as it is. And this was my fascination and challenge at the same time, what to do with this. And finally, the perspective, my personal perspective, both the personal and the political context was, you know, slowly brought into this narrative of the film. When you start, you know, naming people, for example, there is a man that you see in the film that was really, I was so fascinating by him. Every time he walks, he touches the cars. So for the investigation of the film, this element was important because I made him a suspect, right? So I was collecting all these moments, but he was, at some point, I realized that he was touching the car because he is tired. And this is where, in fact, things start to have meaning and to have, you know, a poetic expression. And this is where finally it becomes cinema. And finally it becomes something that you can share with others. So we have to go, you know, step by step and to collect. This is what we do as filmmakers, as artists, we are collectors. So I was collecting and collecting, and I, you know, I was very lucky to find this treasure where I could collect from and express something very unique to me, to my experience. And it is really a miracle that this footage exists because no one ever filmed this neighborhood the way this camera filmed it. And I didn't have this idea. My father did it. I mean, for a different motivation. He didn't think about making a film. But it did exist, finally. This is the most important thing, that someone did it. And someone else found it and made a film with it, you know, made it possible to be shared with people. And I think I learned a lot from this, and it's actually a huge challenge because you really question a lot everything we do as filmmakers, the way we are, you know, pushed to work. And it's not something that I like, you know, all the films that I made was actually kind of resistant to that, to kind of, you know, not mainstream, but cinema being one narrative, one story, one subject. And here in this movie, you look at the images and there are endless subjects, there are endless passerbys, there are endless characters, as in fact life itself. It is endless. And the challenge is, okay, it's true, but how you create a work with it, where you are also carrying different narratives, but at the same time to give a lot of space to anyone else who is in India or in New York to watch and in fact feel with you. Yes, sorry, maybe it was too long, my answer, but
no, it was great. You know, one of the things that's strange about the film, though, is that at this moment, we have such negative feelings about surveillance cameras. You know, we are living in the surveillance state, right? I mean, worldwide, the surveillance state, and just really negative feelings about that as an invasion of privacy, but also as an extreme danger. I mean, supposing someone had used this who wasn't as nice as your father and had thrown that guy in jail, or supposing there'd been something caught on there that someone found eventually. And you can't really take that out of your head when you...
2 days later, the guy calls me and he told me, what is this footage? I said, yeah, this is a camera. I said, yeah, it's surveillance camera. I said, yeah. I said, no, I cannot make you copies. I have to call the police. I said, what do you mean to call the police? It's from 2006. It's like you barely see anything in the footage. It's so painterly. But you know, what is really interesting about the materiality of this footage was that it wasn't HD. It was VHS. And it was, you know, it got old and it became so painterly. And I actually worked with this language. I even destroyed it even more. There were some shots where, you know, things were clear and I didn't like it. It didn't fit into my concept. So I destroyed it. And some of the destruction you see there in the images is made by me. Because I wasn't interested in this camera as being a surveillance camera. I was interested in this footage as almost a painterly footage of this corner. And slowly I forgot about the source of this material. It became something else. The more I worked with it, I destroyed, in fact, in the process of making the film, I destroyed the idea of surveillance camera. This was something else.
I mean, it becomes a whole movie.
Yeah.
I think I want to return to the idea of when it becomes a movie for both films. But I just want to ask Amy something related to the previous discussion. Amy, when you encountered these films or any films, you know, how do you distinguish between formal unintelligibility, you know, formal obfuscation, a movie distancing you, you know, strategically, and cultural unintelligibility? And do you worry that you're missing something when you don't know a context? Are you trying to complete your experience of viewership in any way?
Oh, sure. I mean, one of the first things I said to you was, I don't know anything about Indian cinema. And if you're telling me that this film is striking a blow at Indian cinema or doing everything that's counter to Indian cinema, I said to you, but I don't know what it would be striking a blow against because I'm so ignorant of Indian cinema, you know? And then I think, well, I don't have so many years of writing left. Do I want to spend 6 years really doing a serious study of Indian cinema? Is that one of the things that I need to do? And so, of course, that's a problem. I mean, I think that I like a very recent quote by the African American artist and filmmaker, Arthur Jafa, who made this work that, I mean, he's been a friend for more than 35 years, but at age 55, he was suddenly became a great American artist through this one work of found footage. Love is the message is death. And he said that it was fine for white people to like his film and understand his film. He liked that. He wasn't really making it for them because it was probably bad for white Americans, he was meaning at this point, white Westerners, to think that they had to be the center of the universe for every film. And every film had to come to them and be clear to them, and it was probably bad for them. And I agree with that. I have no expectations of that. So, you know.
But then do you think that you're still able to respond to it? Are there, what do you then connect to? Are you thinking about form?
You know, I have to say I was puzzled by Horse's Tale. And I was most puzzled by, it isn't that I didn't respond to it, but I didn't really know what I was responding to. What I was most puzzled by was there was a period in Western European and American film studies where everything had to be run through the sieves of Freud, Lacan, Borges. And then I'm looking at this film, which is totally foreign to me. And suddenly there you are saying Freud, Lacan, Borges. And I thought, are they studying the same stuff? I mean, we've kind of thrown out those sieves and said, done enough with them. We don't want to think about them anymore. Let's get free of them. And here they come in this film made yesterday. So I'm really curious about that.
We are in a different time. No, so completely we do go through in time ideas, and then we have memory of ideas, and then we forget ideas. There's no proper continuity, you know, like there are works of fiction and other artists who take into consideration this historicity that's happening in terms of ideas and stuff like that. So when it comes to that, it might look even more alien when it's coming from a landscape that you cannot ever, like, we are calling someone Freud who you can never imagine as Freud. There's a Netflix series on Freud, which the guy looks really like Freud. All we have is a chair that is looking like the chair that looked in the photographs that we saw that Freud has. So a lot of it is, yes, maybe like Amy says, from a different time, but I think Lacan is like super duper awesome and his theories are awesome. So I don't know, maybe his theories are like parallelly used right now also, and the fact that he existed in multitudes. No, there's no mirror stage. You can't search for Google and mirror stage and find a theory. There's a guy who worked 50 years on that, and there's like multiple versions of it. So we, as it is, when we are expressing a kind of attitude towards truth, I'm not saying we have any kind of truth inside it, but a kind of multitude, that pluriverse that we present. I think Lacan's theories seem very relevant, and Freud, by relation, by historicity, gets associated. So it's all by association. I don't know, in whole energy to make sense of kind of what's happening around us. Maybe I'm just speculating from the writer's point of view, because most of what you're asking is from that story sense. Yeah,
I think early discussions though that we had were a lot about this idea of these deterministic grand narratives that I think has been studied again, right? You study these grand narratives and you see what impact they've had, whether it's Karl Marx or who's not in our film though. But I mean, you see what these narratives had, and like you said, perhaps today philosophy has taken those ideas and thrown it aside. But perhaps that could be also because these sort of grand narratives have a sense of that dominance attached to them. So, what are those grand narratives? In some sense, the film is trying to find, but I don't think it's revealing so much. So, Devika, like you were saying, the film is probably hiding what precise grand narratives we are targeting here, not necessarily just for criticism, but just as study also.
But the concept of film as dream, and the concept of film as dream, particularly in relation to, in Western Europe, surrealism grew out of that idea of the creative process being inseparable from dreaming. And that's central to your film. I mean, it is, in that sense, a surrealist. I see it as a surrealist film, and a film that says you cannot separate the dream life from the waking life. And there is not only is there no way to do it, it's not productive to do it.
Yeah, of course, the productivity of it can be argued both ways, but I do think that whether film as a dream or film as a memory is also for us a suitable parallel, and that's something that we sort of discovered with the film as well, in the sense that when we were editing the film, we started editing like memories and started thinking about our own internal processes of how we recollect memories or how we leave dreams, even just plain memories that are fact, that the rational mind is trying to say is fact, and how those are recorded, started becoming what the film is. So film as memory, film as dream, they seem the same to us and hence reality. So yeah.
There is a lot of humor in your film. I was saying before, there is a lot of humor.
And especially in the lead performance of, I feel like every time he twitches, you know, the tail twitches, it's just this visual gag that's... Sorry, Manoj, you were saying something?
No, also we have this kind of a gag with the whole linguistic zone also. Like we are totally playing with what the conception of memory and dream and recollection, what is lost and what is found. So we are playing with kind of these concepts. So which is why we are finding points of unity across time philosophically, which is why we can go whichever way we can. I feel, because there are parts in Kamal's film, for example, where I get completely lost. Like I'm not at all inside the film. That like I don't know if I'm autonomously present. Like the film transports me into another sphere where, like for example, the guy with the funny walk. So there is that everyday scenario that it plays, like right before the everyday scenario, I just felt like everybody is walking funnily in that particular camera angle. Like I just came to the conclusion that humans walk funnily, and then I see that everyday shot. So Kamal film for me locates the kind of, no matter where you go and where you search, you can find those points of unity. And that everyday shot, Kamal, it just blew my mind. Thank you.
I mean, it's like a nature film, you know, like
it's like beautiful, too beautiful.
Yeah.
It is like a nature film. It's a nature film, in fact, funnily.
It's like National Geographic.
Yeah. I mean,
For
what,
youth.
Seriously,
I mean, what? Yeah, we are the same. We are animals, right? I mean, finally, and if you have a camera, and then of course this is the work of the editing, zooming in and reframing and slowing down the image. But it was really all for the sake of serving the idea of passers-by being the center of this work and studying human being and human nature just in this one corner of the street. And the deeper I went into this, I dived into this, the more fascinated I became by it. How people walk, how young people walk, how old people walk, how men, how women. And in fact, I was thinking the other day, what is really special about this film, it is gender free. You cannot know who is a man and who's a woman. Only me, I can say, because I was working with the person doing the color grading. I would tell him, oh, she is. He said, this is a man, or she is it a woman or a man? She's a woman. So no, I think she's a man. He's a man. So this by itself, it's so beautiful, because it wasn't about these definitions that we know in life, how things are being defined. And sometimes I would write this, some of in the scenes that are, all this intertitles, and I would say a little girl, and then my friend who was watching with me would tell me, she's not a little girl, she's a woman. So it was really our perception, my perception, probably related to the fact that I know the neighborhood, I know some of these people, and all of that was in fact, in a way entertaining. I was talking about the humor because finally we as human beings, we are funny creatures. I mean, with all the misery we carry with us, but we are funny creatures. And when you start really framing and looking at the characters, at these passerby, it becomes very funny.
My favorite was that moment where there's this guy who looks directly into the camera.
Yeah.
You caught him and you're like, that was a great moment.
So that's why I was saying, I loved all these crazy people who appeared in the camera, because these are the ones, the crazy ones, who made the art, right? I mean, the guy who threw the stone, for no reason. And it was very funny because it didn't make much sense, because he would walk and stand at the corner of the street and then throw the stone. So he wouldn't just break the car's window. It was like a sport, So for me, it's a mystery, it's like the mystery of life, finally, that what is the meaning? And we were talking before about, films having to have a meaning or a message or, a narrative or a clear idea and what they are about. And this is, here you have material where really it's embedded, really the mystery of life. And this is what's beautiful about making art and making films, is the mystery, is the secret.
I mean, I'm curious, at what point do you find the film? In the both of you are using strategies. Like Kamal, you found this footage. You said you wanted to make a whole film out of one day, right? So, like, when does it actually transition into cinema? When does that found footage become a film? And Horsetail is different. It's not found footage, but it's a very obsessive film. When are you like, okay, we've stuffed enough into it? More will just make it disintegrate, less will. It's a very fine balance you're striking, right? Maximalism is it's meticulous. So I'm curious, where did you find the film?
Well, our film was, to be honest, it was a lot longer than the film that you saw. So the original version, Manoj, am I allowed to say?
Yeah.
But
Please.
yeah, okay. It was
You're
like
giving us a
3
scoop.
hours and 15 minutes. No, I mean in the sense it was 3 hours and 15 minutes long. So we're still finding it hard to forget that film. But that film would have had maybe more of this maximalism, and so I guess at some point we had to decide that too much is actually too much, and maybe you can condense and constrict and retie the whole thing together again to make it tighter. So that was that process. But actually, if I may, Kamal, I also wanted to ask you, like, how did you um, think of a time duration? Because I was wondering, how did you arrive at that sort of a duration? Like, was it premeditated? Was it something that just evolved? What was that filmmaking process like?
Well, right from the beginning, I was thinking of it as a long film, and when I was saying this to people, they would laugh. So, well, who's gonna watch an hour and a half of surveillance camera or one angle? But I couldn't express and make you experience what I feel without taking you really into this long journey with me. It was really important that I go with you step by step, even with the idea I had in mind that at the beginning, surely I'm doing a kind of investigation. And then slowly I free myself from that. And the film becomes about many other things, becomes about all these characters, becomes about memory. It becomes a dream sometimes. So when I started, I didn't really have a fixed idea how long it will be, but I was working with it as a long film. And constructing the film, this is the kind of film where you make it in the editing. So one thing takes you to another, but the concept right from the beginning was clear, because it was really about finding out who threw the stone. And this very small idea helped me a lot to start with the investigation, which helped me then to introduce the characters, naming them, who's who, my family, the characters, and then studying gestures and activities of every person who passes by and who is, according to this investigation, becoming a suspicious person. And the people who became characters in this film were the people that forced themselves on me to become characters, because they appeared a lot in front of the camera. They were passing a lot in front of the camera, and finally they became the characters. So they forced, in fact, this is again the idea of, the opposite of casting in cinema. They were casting themselves. So I was seeing all of that, while watching, and then at some point, and this wasn't the idea in the beginning, I remembered all these notes that I took while watching. And these became, in fact, the kind of diary, intertitles, somehow notes of an investigator. I mean, finally, we artists, filmmakers, we're investigators. I mean, we are kind of detectives, right? And the more we become like that, I think the better we can express things around us, but not in the sense of this, what surveillance camera is doing is to control us. No, it's actually the opposite. It's about really being interested in things, in people that we usually don't pay attention to, and trying to connect with the other.
do want to return to the question of duration. So, Shyam, you said that you had a three plus hour cut, but then why did you bring it down to 2-ish hours? Is it because that's what a feature length film is? I'm just wondering, like, what is that metric that then you return to? I mean, in Kamal's case, he's describing it as, okay, what will allow me to convey the experience, right, of the life that is captured. And I'm curious, in your case, what's that yardstick then?
So, Shyam,
Okay. I don't think it was that clear I mean, it was more process oriented than really, I mean, on a very practical scale, we worked as a team, right? So, in that team, it was not just me and Manoj, of course, there was Karthik, who was the cinematographer, and Giri, who was the editor. So, we would take multiple turns sitting on the edit. So it was really a film that was edited with multiple editors like that. And we would have like very simple uh, fun related rules, which is that if you do something today, the next day, the next person can't change what was done before. So you kept, as the process, kept evolving the film to more I mean,
so every day the person
basically
had like found footage, basically, like the next
right.
Every day's editor was like working with
Yeah, so the film's structure changed like that, and I think that rewriting process, of course, had something to do with. I mean, to me personally, had something to do with uh, how much time I, as an individual, can devote to the film if I were a first-time viewer. The film is one that takes a considerable amount, at least what people say, it takes a certain amount of mental energy to watch, because you're always trying to connect the dots, and the dots that connect uh, are in that manner uh, opening more doors and hence more time to process. So it was always a challenge in that sense to keep the pacing of the film in a certain manner, but also to make it as tight as possible without it going into, I think, what we would refer to a dead space, where the film is dead, but it does die several times. I think any film dies several times, but yeah, to reduce that.
Amy, I'm curious. You are of course like very familiar with avant-garde cinema, especially in the US, and I think there are elements in both films that explore those strategies, and in particular, just the endurance. Like testing viewer endurance to some extent and viewer patience. I don't mean that obviously in a pejorative sense. I'm thinking back to like Wavelength, Michael Snow, or films like these, which are demanding attention and rewarding you in for that test of endurance. So I'm curious, like for you, what does that look like, and what is the value of that? Are you especially now that I feel like in America, I don't know if everywhere, but I think there's a lot of conversation about slow cinema, fast cinema, short films, long films, whether people have the attention span to subject themselves to cinema that can be difficult. So where do you approach those questions from?
Oh, I mean, that's just huge. One of the things that you think about immediately when I teach, for example, something that's called experimental film, although all films are an experiment. I mean, no one knows what they're going to get.
Except films made by algorithms.
Well, even that. To make a film by an algorithm is an experiment in itself. if you're making a narrative film that you want audiences to come to, there's a model and it's 3 acts and it takes between an hour and a half and 2.5 hours, and that's there. And it's there if you were going to write a classical concerto or whatever. The one thing that happened in experimental film when it defined itself as not being narrative or not being primarily narrative, then it involves time. And so how do you make a structure in time when there's not a 3-act play behind it? And that has always been the big question. And it's a question anytime you come to a work. If you're going to throw away that model, which dominates 95% of the movies made in the world, then how are you going to decide how to make a structure in time? So, of course, it's always in my mind, how is this going to resolve itself? You know, is it taking too long to resolve itself? Is it? But that's my attention, and that's totally subjective. And you know, Warhol said he never intended anyone to watch his films from beginning to end, and yet people who come and watch Empire see as much in the tiny changes of light and the reflection in the glass as what Kamal is talking about in relation to his film. I don't, although I have made myself sit through it. And it needs to be that long. I need to know it's that long. I don't need to sit through it, but I need to know that Empire is 6 hours long at 24 frames and nearly 8 at 16 frames, because the meaning of it is that the Empire State Building will never change. It is a permanent erection in the New York City landscape. And that's why when the trade towers fell, the first thing I thought about was Warhol's Empire. Because Warhol's Empire was supposedly the proof that those structures, which are so phallic-like, are invincible. So I don't know how to answer that question. And I think for everyone who makes films that are not, governed by that 3-act 19th century form, that's the first question you come to. That's the big question you come to, and you come to in the middle, and you come to it at the editing table, and and maybe in the end you're never satisfied with the answer. And now things are totally different because everyone is involved in long form television. And you'd have to be crazy to think that long form television wasn't affecting the way people watch moving image work, the way people make moving image work, that people are no longer thinking about discrete objects that I'll watch all at once. I watched 50 hours of, I resisted it because I knew it was going to be like a drug for me, but I resisted the Bureau for 4 years. And then a few weeks ago, I watched 50 hours in a week. It was like crack. I finally knew what it was like to be addicted to crack. And now I'm going to go and watch the whole fucking thing again because I have to write about it. But did that change my sense of duration? I watched it the way I watched avant-garde movies, It's crazy. But I think, you have a dominant form. And if you are not in that dominant form of the 3-act film, which even most documentaries fit themselves into. As awful as that is, most documentaries are governed by a 3-act narrative. And if you don't, it's hard. And now you have coming down on top of you this totally other dominant form, which is serial television.
Mm. Well, I just have one question from my end, and there's a couple audience questions in it, and then I'll let you all go. But I wanted to think about, political art and political filmmaking. I see both these films as political in their own ways. I don't know if you guys, you as filmmakers do, but Kamal, your film, like we were talking before, takes place in a very political context and has the subtext of the occupation, and Horsetail, I think, is political in its form, in the way that it's talking about things that you hinted at cinema's ability to both productively and unproductively blur the lines between screen and life, and the way that I think the power of cinema that is both like propagandist and also dreamlike and transporting. And this is kind of a broad question, but I'm wondering if art that if you think about making art that is effectively political, like, are you thinking about art that can have an impact, that can change something? Because there is one school of thought, I think, that would believe that only didactic art can, get across a particular message, can be ideological. And then there's also political art that is political in the form within the image, but then is that disconnected from social realities? I know this is painting a very broad field for you guys to enter, but is that something you think about, like effect, impact, intervention?
I mean, in my case, I always thought, and I think that the political is personal, and I cannot really differentiate where the political start and where the personal starts. And this is where, in fact, this film, the dynamic of this film is very much deeply embedded in this reality where I came from. But this is what the image is showing. It's not something that I'm imposing on the image. I don't add my voice. I do use notes to give some direction, to name some people, name some events. But I did my best to prevent this film to become just a political tool or a political film, because I was interested in many other things at the same time. And one of the problems I think many filmmakers who come from the margins or minority filmmakers are facing when they make a film is that they are expected to make a certain type of a film, to describe a certain reality in a certain way. Especially when I mean, it started with the TV, but now all this mega powers of series and Netflix and Amazon, all it became very really difficult to make a film which is not providing the cliche they want to see and providing the image they usually are used to see and read in their daily newspaper. But filmmakers are not journalists. Filmmakers are dreamers. And films should explore the opposite of what the dominant media is showing us. So I know that it's a difficult position because, by definition, if you come from a certain country, you are expected to carry a certain message or to explain things. But I didn't want to explain. I'm more interested in really showing the bottom of the ocean. And this is what my film about. I mean, surely it is related to Palestine, to losing a country, feeling out of place. But at the same time, I think all humanity is feeling out of place. So this is where, in fact, I find somehow comfort in the way I make this film, and it's a tool of freedom for me.
I'll just speak from what I think in terms of a political context. I think there is a lot of criticism within the film, but there's also at the same time a balancing factor to try and understand it rather than just criticize what it is that we're talking about. But in terms of dominant paradigms, I think any culture faces this problem where, I mean, it's not something that we have not discussed before, not today, but in other conversations with other people. But the fact that a dominant culture tries to erase a alternate culture or a suppressed culture, so that cultural loss is the way by which that dominance occurs. So Tamil as a language and Tamil as a people is facing that sort of a hegemony, but we're not talking about just one single factor. There's several factors with globalization, with within India, the sort of suppression that happens. We're talking about all of that in some sense, and also about that suppression and as Kamal rightly put, that displacement in a universal sense as well. So yeah, so that's basically on multiple layers. The film talks about that.
Also, if I may add, like the didactic form itself is not a problem for me. It's just that it's just one of the ways in which cinema can function. That's all.
But is there, I guess you have all these themes, but do you think that laying them out in a simple, understandable way increases their power or takes away from it? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
The didactic forms are many, like when the form of cinema, the AV is the form of cinema. There's nothing more to cinema than AV. So AV is now available freely. So now everybody can do it. So didactic is like prevalent throughout, and also various forms of the AV. So didactic is not even there are self-indulgent forms, narcissistic forms, like lots of different forms that the current media, social media, and so many other kind of media that we everyday access happens. So didactic form itself is not the problem. A didactic form is just one form that directly speaks to the audience. There are, thankfully to the many forms of AV, now we have many other means of doing it. For me, cinema is really special because it can also do it. For me, Kamal's film, I want to see it in a large screen. For me, I want to register this. I feel like cinema can be something else in a big screen. So in a big screen, in a collective experience, for example, our film, we have worked. I am saying for a big screen, not literally, because we've tried to imagine a canvas that's that big. Imagine an artist working with a canvas that big. That's all. Nothing else. And also the fact that it could become a really novelty item the way it's going. So I'm not really able to predict things. But generally speaking, I don't have anything against didactic forms. In fact, didactic forms lend a lot to even kind of popular, all kinds of narrative medium, including popular media, including news and stuff like that. So all of them work with didactic forms. So it's all good. So it's not like it's either or. It's not an either or situation.
I think,
Yeah.
sorry, Amy.
Oh no, I mean, come on, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about what Bresson once said, because he was asked a lot about whose these films are made for, the viewers, etc. And he said that he is hiding the subject, but he is hiding it in a way that the viewer can find it. And I think this is really the balance that we work with. If you put too much, if you define things too much, then, somehow we lose the interest in this, in the film medium as a secret. And it's really about going back and forth and, going back to your earlier question, how you work, how you construct. It's really going back and forth between putting too much, putting less, and you learn with time. It's like cooking, how much spices you put if you like cooking. So with time you learn. Sometimes you do, and, you put too much spices, you want to test, and then it doesn't work. And then sometimes you cook just with salt, and then it really depends a lot in the process itself. And defining things too much definitely make them less poetic. So it's about finding the balance.
And Amy, I'm curious about your thoughts about, political cinema, and if you think that certain forms add or take away from a film's political intervention as a critic.
I think that there are all kinds of films. There are films that are purposefully didactic and they work very well on their own terms. But those are not the only kind of political films. I think that the question you've raised is a question, it comes up all the time. If you say you are a political person and you have certain political goals, then you're going to ask, well, how will this film reinforce or not reinforce those goals? Who will it speak to? Will it alienate certain audiences who will not understand? I mean, this is an argument that just comes up kind of every decade. I remember Be Ruby Rich having this argument about Jean Dielman and, was Jean Dielman a housewife? And if so, I mean, you just have to, as a filmmaker, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to do? Do you want to affect change in people who care nothing about poetry or about the expressive qualities of films, but want information told in the most dynamic way so they see the way forward? And you'll be that kind of filmmaker. I mean, I really believe in multiplicity, but I think films can be, I don't think they can help but be political. We are political beings. We live in the world of power and desire, and we negotiate that every day. And so,
I think power and desire feels like a really good note to start.
Topic.
Yeah. I just want to go through a few quick questions from the audience. They're kind of fun ones. One question: how did the word unusual find the way into Kamal's film title?
Because in that summer, July 2006, it rained, and it never rains, in fact, in summer there. So this was an unusual summer.
Wow, it's such a beautiful, simple but beautiful secret.
Because it had to rain that summer.
Yeah, exactly. It was an unusual summer.
A comment. I had to think of Ulysses while watching Horsetail. It's just a comment. It's not a question, but was that on your mind at all?
Ulysses, as in the Greek.
The epic.
Right. Yeah, no, not novel. Yeah. But I mean, this whole idea of hero's journey and that was definitely the idea of myth making and myth building was definitely a part of that discussion. In the sense, we were trying to create a myth that would which would combat other myths that are trying to like dominate, right? I think that's the way myths work. So this was a myth for what we wanted to make. I'm not sure if it's for our people or for the world, but yeah, it was a myth.
Right. Amy, did Amy ever consider herself a detective in her work as a critic? In the sense that has she experienced cinema or a particular film as a riddle to be solved?
I'm not sure that detectives actually solve riddles. So this is an odd question.
Well, maybe.
No, that role has never, probably never entered my mind. I mean, I like to figure out why things for me personally work or don't work. I mean, that's just, you know, that's the word you use about the mystery of the film. You say it works or it doesn't work. And I like to figure out why I personally feel that a film works or doesn't work. So in that sense, but that's not a riddle, you know?
That's psychoanalysis.
I think
that's therapy.
I think critics as detectives means films are crimes and filmmakers are criminals. So,
well, that sort of works in the context of Kamal's film, I guess. You know, that's the birth of his film. And final question, I think this is really fun. This is actually from Dennis, where we talk about found footage filmmaking and the sense of getting lost in a film. Are there lost footage films? Do you think there are lost footage films?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's so important right now, in particular in African American studies. The idea that there is, that you can imagine what an archive would have been if this work hadn't been lost. So if you look at something like Garrett Bradley's America, where she makes these 12 vignettes that could have actually existed if, you know, 99% of the films ever made are lost. And so people are beginning to think of the lost archive. And that's particularly important for right now for African American artists and scholars. Not in the way that, what is that terrible new television series? There's a lot of sex and there are Black people in
Bridgerton.
Bridgerton. I mean, Bridgerton, that's just awful. I mean, you know, you make something that could not possibly have happened and you never question. But the idea that you could make something that should have existed if it were not lost, or if the camera was not available or whatever, that's a really dominant idea now.
I think all of us, me, Kamal, and a whole lot of us have been like, I think we'll continue to travel searching for what is lost. So I cannot probably even ascribe it to a sentence. So yeah, what is lost, and we are constantly searching. We are constantly searching for it. Yeah, we're constantly searching for that landscape that we belong to. Yeah.
I mean, if I understand Dennis' question remark in a poetic sense, I would say most of it is lost. despite the fact that, you know, there are so many films, and of course there are many wonderful films, but at the same time there is so much still missing. And I think more and more, despite the fact that more people are making films, but I think more and more certain type of films are being made. So there are a lot of missing images, missing films, and that's why we exist.
It's good to end by justifying why we exist, you know. So we'll take that note, but I did want to just leave the opportunity for any of you to ask each other any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, or make any comments that you know, we did cover. Manoj, you had something to say?
Yeah, Devika, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of Kamal and Amy. So I want to just thank you for just being here and just say hi once again before you do.
Please invite me to where you are in India.
Yes, please come, please come. It'll be great to host you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Dennis has miraculously appeared as he promised. So thank you so much, all. I mean, I just want to say such a privilege to be together in a virtual room with you all, and hope we can do this again, you know, physically over a drink. And yeah, just thank you for entertaining my questions and being so game for this long and mysterious discussion.
Thank you all. It was
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I hope you all come to New York, where
Yes,
Devika and
we
I
must.
are.
Hopefully soon.
We must bring them here.
we will come. Two of you are there.
Yeah, and we will also try to invite Kamal, Shyam, and Manoj to Berlin, and Devika as well. So part of us can actually meet. We are trying to show all the films we have screened online and in the real cinema this summer. So we hope we can still make it possible. Yeah, news will be out soon. We are working on it. Thank you all also from my side for being open to this little experiment and this exciting, I'm still totally excited, this excited constellation of films, and you all. Thank you for helping us to get lost and found in cinema and those images. And yeah, I feel like after listening to you, I feel like I have found friends in spirit, definitely. So I couldn't feel more happy with what we are doing here. So thank you all again, and also to our audience, and of course also to Devika. Thank you again for moderating, and yeah, to our audience. I hope you will stick around and still use the remaining hours to explore these films as far as you haven't seen them. I'm pretty convinced after this debate you will want to see them. So see you online. Tomorrow is the final remaining debate on talk style. So then we will go deep into aesthetics again and discover what it actually means to have a cinematic style. And of course the politics of style will also be there. There's always a political question in every of our debates, I can guarantee. So yeah, see you soon. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.